Hey guys, I am MG, and today I'll be looking at Despicable Me 2, which is a 2013 American animated comedy film that was directed by returning directors Chris Renaud and Pierre Coffin, and written by Cinco Paul and Ken Dorio, which is about Gru falling in love with his partner while investigating a theft. However, why don't we stop eating nachos and start reviewing right now? Yeah, this is definitely inferior to the first film in almost every way, outside of the animation, setting, and voice acting. The new animation style looks absolutely gorgeous, with it holding up really well several years later. And the new locations are pretty cool and vibrant as well, especially the mall. But everything else about this was just not as tightly written. And my main issue is how this movie feels like it has a bunch of filler nonsense, which is mainly thanks to the screenplay, since this film has a few subplots in its main story, like all of the romances between a few characters. And I wasn't all that intrigued by any of them, and they made the pacing a bit off, since this film does drag more and more as it goes on, and the story always jumps between these different plots in a way that doesn't feel very natural. It was charming enough, I suppose, but not quite enough to be all that of an enjoyable experience. However, it still had plenty of funny moments, with my favorite being the interactions between Gru and the girls. Gru had a lot of hilarious facial expressions, and his interactions with the girls were even better, especially when he's with Agnes. And that scene where she doesn't know what he's trying to tell her was flat out hilarious, especially when Gru looks like he's pooping. Oh yeah, the old characters were still really endearing. Gru and the girls are absolutely delightful, with them having a lot of amusing and heartwarming moments between each other, with all of the voice performers still being very energetic. Especially Steve Carell, who has not lost any charm at all. Dr. Nefario has a really nice storyline about wanting to be evil again, but instead decides to protect his family. That was a nice little arc. The minions aren't very funny or charming in this, unfortunately. They have a couple of comedic moments, I guess, but I mainly felt nothing towards them, and they were a little bit annoying in some parts, with their scenes also being very pointless and lame, so that's not great. But the new characters they introduce are pretty decent. Lucy was kind of enjoyable, with a very lively performance from Kristen Wiig, and while she doesn't have a lot of chemistry with Gru, their romance together was still sweet enough. And Del Macho was a pretty fun villain. Not a Vector, but he was solid for what he was, with fine enough acting from Benjamin Bratt. But I think Al Pacino would have been much better. It was a shame he left the production, but Benjamin was a perfectly serviceable replacement for him, so not a total loss. Also, the chicken is hilarious, and I love how he forms an arch enemy of Gru and Lucy. The music itself was incredible, and the new songs from Pharrell Williams were really great. Just a Cloud Away was great at setting up a romance for Margalo, all of the old songs they play are still charming, and Happy is my favorite because it really slaps. The action was pretty great, and it had a lot of really cool moments, especially when Gru shoots everyone. That was awesome. The musical moment at the end wasn't as good as the original, but it was still really amusing nonetheless. And overall, this film is a pretty fine successor to the original. It's not as funny, and definitely not as emotionally investing, but its existence doesn't harm anything, and I would still recommend watching it if you liked the original. 6.4 out of 10. Goodbye everyone, and thank you for watching. Bye!